Carnitas are one of my favorite foods ever. They are so good. They are fatty and juicy and crispy, like shredded pork. Usually they're made by taking cuts of pork and simmering them for hours and hours in pork fat, in lard. You can make them at home with pork shoulder and a bunch of lard and just cook it in a Dutch oven for a really long time, but that requires you to have a lot of lard on hand, which honestly I almost never do. So I wanted to come up with a way to make them on a sheet tray where you could use a couple tablespoons of lard. That way you're still getting the pork fat and crispy flavor that carnitas have, but you're not having to use blocks and blocks of lard. I know slow cooking in like a pressure cooker is a way that people like to make them. For me, that misses the really fatty pork flavor of traditional carnitas. I think it gets you something juicy but not fatty, and there's a really big difference in my mind for carnitas. They need to be fatty and crispy and juicy. If you are like me and you love carnitas, these are a really good way to get them on the table, in a taco, in a bowl, in a couple hours, and you don't have to get a bunch of lard for it. So make them with me.
To start this dish, we need a base of some really good aromatics. So I'm gonna peel one orange and use that for a sweet, citrusy flavor. You can also cut this in half because we're gonna use the juice as well. This dish is super versatile. It's one of the things that I love about it. So this could really be seasoned with anything. Today I'm making a spicy version and a non-spicy version. For the spicy one, I'm gonna slice up one jalapeno, and that will be mixed in with our cubed pork when it goes into the oven. Other than that, both versions are gonna need a bunch of garlic, about 5 cloves each or so. I'm keeping things pretty simple today, but feel free to experiment with a ton of different flavor combinations. This is also a great time to preheat your oven to 300 degrees Fahrenheit. Once your aromatics are taken care of, we can move on to the pork. This is a bone-in pork shoulder, roughly 6 pounds or so. The bone in this kind of cut is large, T-shaped, and runs through the middle of the shoulder. There's a large side of the meat that runs under the bone that can be sliced off really easily. To get the rest of the meat off, you can locate the bone and run your knife along it, making shallow cuts until the meat can be rolled away, just like this. It doesn't have to be perfect. Any bone or meat left, you can just freeze and save for stock later. Just slice the larger cuts into 1.5 inch slabs. With those slabs, we're gonna cut them into strips and then finally into 1.5 inch cubes. That size is gonna give us chunks that can handle being tossed around while being cooked, but are also gonna be tender and luscious when they're done. Pork shoulder has a really good range of meat and fat, so each piece is gonna have some fat and dark meat or white meat, and this gives the final dish some diversity. Some pieces are gonna be juicier, some pieces are gonna be meatier. At the end, it's all delicious mixed together. This much pork is gonna be split between 2 different sheet trays. For the spicy version, I'm gonna add my sliced jalapeno, then both versions are gonna get half of the pork cubes. I'm gonna add 5 cloves of crushed garlic to each one, along with a few orange peels, maybe 2 or 3, and a squeeze of fresh orange juice. When it comes to dry seasoning, this could really be anything. I'm gonna add salt and pepper to both, and some chili flake is gonna go into the spicy one. I'm gonna add a bay leaf or 2 to each sheet tray, along with some oregano. The combo of oregano, bay, and orange is super classic for carnitas, and it's super delicious. Now for the lard, I'm gonna add 3 to 4 tablespoons to each sheet tray. This will depend on the size of your tray and the amount of fat on the pork itself, so this isn't an exact science. We're gonna give them both a good mix, add a splash of water, and cover. These are gonna go into the oven for 2.5 hours at 300 degrees. In this initial phase, we're looking to cook the pork till it becomes tender, and the crispiness is gonna come at the end. After that first 2.5 hours, the meat is tender but not perfect. This is gonna depend on the size of the pork and your oven. I'm gonna put mine back in for 15 to 30 minutes with the foil on. That way it becomes super shreddable. The texture is all up to you, just give it a taste and make sure it's where you want it. Once you have the meat as tender as you like, we can turn up the oven to 375 Fahrenheit and remove the foil. We're gonna leave it in at 375 for 30 minutes, stirring every 15 minutes to ensure even browning. Use that 30 minutes to prep any taco toppings like minced onion and cilantro if that's your thing. Your meat is done when it's crispy, well browned, and tender. Look at how delicious and glistening that pork is.
One of the reasons that this works so well is there is the fat in it. There's the lard that we put in the pan, and it's gonna make this like juicy and falling apart. And you can see it like, it's a little greasy. It's carnitas, it's kind of meant to be greasy. Some of the pork pieces are a little leaner, some are fattier, they're all juicy and chunky and well seasoned, and they're gonna fall apart. And you could take this and pull it apart, you could chop it, you could leave it. I like to leave it and sort of have these more like Some of it's pulled, some of it's whole, but like, it's really juicy. You get some of the orange. It just falls apart and it's delicious.
These carnitas make great meal prep. They are easy to make in big batches. It keeps in the fridge super well. And then when you need carnitas at any time, you just get a pan over medium heat and heat up the carnitas. They'll get crispy and delicious, as good as they were on the day that you made them. As I mentioned before, this would be perfect in a bowl, in a burrito, or on tacos. But I'm just gonna put this on some corn tortillas with some minced onion and some salsa.
It's really delicious. Ooh, that's what you want. Will you zoom in on that? This is exactly the little drippage. I think that is a requirement for a good carnitas. This one's a little spicier from the jalapeno. This is also like a jalapeno salsa. But the citrus is there. The orange peel is good. You taste the pork. It's very porky. It's not like wet, but you see there's a little grease, and the grease is good. It tastes very much like pork, and it tastes delicious and crispy and amazing. So, look, it may not be as traditional as a big pot of lard bubbling away and pork cooking away in it slowly, but it gets a very similar endpoint. You get the crispiness, you get the fall apartness, and it's everything you want. And it didn't take 8 hours and 4 blocks of lard. So definitely worth it. I'm gonna die.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you really liked it, go ahead and subscribe. That helps me out immensely. I want to add a little extra to the end of each video and just share with you all something I've been really into lately. This can be a podcast, a movie, a show, just sort of anything. I don't have any rules yet. I've recently been really into this podcast called Strong Songs by Kirk Hamilton. He is a musician and goes really in depth on some of the best songs ever made, and he describes what makes them so great, and it's just a delightful listen to. If you're into music like I am, but you don't really know how to talk about it or what's happening, it's super worth checking out. Thanks everybody and have a great day.